Good afternoon, everyone. If you could all take your seats, please. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I have been given the great honor of welcoming you all on behalf of Chatham House for today's special event reflecting on African diaspora engagement and policy evolution. This is a flagship event organized every year by Afford, and we have had the privilege of partnering with them for over a decade, something that myself and my colleagues at Chatham House, in the Chatham House Africa program, are very proud of. But this year's event is an even more special one, as it is being held as Afford celebrates its 30th anniversary. Over the last 30 years, Afford has stood out in its work of connecting the African diaspora and policymakers, and in promoting learning, sharing of ideas, and influencing thinking on issues pertinent to the development of the African continent and the positive role the African diaspora plays or can play. But the last year has been a special one for us in the Chatham House Africa program as well, as we celebrated our 20th anniversary. So we're 10 years younger than you guys, our colleagues at Afford. To mark this important moment, as well as to celebrate Chatham House's 100th anniversary in 2020, we launched our stream of work on African agency in international affairs. Through this important focus, through this research, we are examining African states' bilateral and multilateral relationships and the influence that African governments, institutions, and citizens, including those in the diaspora, exert in global affairs. And as we continue our work on this important topic and seek to promote better understanding of African countries and citizens' engagement in today's rapidly changing global context, we hope to leverage on the African diaspora's knowledge, influence, and engagement. Once again, on behalf of Chatham House, thank you for joining us for this discussion today. And let me also take this opportunity to congratulate you on your 30th anniversary. I have seen firsthand how you all, Jibril, Onyekachi, Stella, and many others colleagues at Afford, how you've worked tirelessly to expand your reach in the African diaspora and with your various projects. We are very much looking forward to seeing where the next 30 years will lead and to continue working with you. Thank you. I do apologize. I have been asked to tell you that if you want to access the Wi-Fi, there is a Chatham House visitor Wi-Fi, and the password is debate31, D capital.
Well, hello everybody and welcome. I hope everyone is feeling okay. I think the weather took a number of us by surprise. I brought my thicker jacket, not realizing, but I hope you're okay. So, welcome to Afford's African Diaspora Development Day. AD3 was initiated 23 years ago as an influencing space to bring together the African diaspora, policymakers, funders, to share and learn and build partnerships and networks in order to enhance the ability of the African diaspora to contribute meaningfully to the continent of Africa. So, today's theme is about the transformative power of the African diaspora, celebrating 30 years of Afford in action, diaspora in action. So it promises to be a very intriguing and celebrating exchange. Over the course of this event, we will hear from a lineup of leading diaspora transformers and change makers, including a pre-recording from Tom Ilube and Willy Mutenza. There'll be 3 areas of discussion. The first, their inspiration for diaspora action. Second, the impact of their most precious achievements. And the third, priorities for diaspora activism over the next 30 years. So as Afford launches its year-long engagement and celebrations over the next 12 months, we will have a short clip now we'll play on what the impact of Afford has been over those last 30 years, both with regards to the individuals that we have engaged with, but also with regards to the impact and contributions that we've made in Africa.
For over 30 years, Afford's work with the African diaspora has had a dramatic impact, transforming the P's, people, policies, and programs.
For me, Afford is definitely a pioneer in the area of diaspora policy and practice. And Afford did do quite a lot of work in the first 10 years of its existence to create this area of work around diaspora contributions, typology, and to help everyone understand what these contributions were, what it looked like, and what the potential was. Afford is often 10 years ahead of its thinking around what development in Africa looks like. It's definitely one of its unique transformational powers.
We've created over 30,000 jobs and mobilized hundreds of volunteers, with 18,000 members of the diaspora trained and made more aware of how to maximize their activism and potential.
I'm very proud to be an alumni of sorts of Afford, and it's given me access to a community that has inspired me, enlarging what was possible for me in my life in terms of my career. If I was thinking about going and working on the continent, or thinking about the possibility of investing into businesses on the continent, Afford gave me an access to thinking about those possibilities in a real way.
Afford has been a leader in helping influence major diaspora policies with governments and funders.
Afford has had a massive impact on me in giving me that space to believe that African diaspora can contribute to policy making, not only for an impact in Britain, but across the world. It gives me legitimacy to be able to put on paper, look, Afford have done this research on diaspora. It is important. We should then think about the diaspora of NHS staff. So that political, intellectual anchorage has been amazing.
Our diverse programs range from innovative financing solutions and job creation to promoting culture and heritage, with a focus on skill sharing, mentoring for entrepreneurs, and diaspora network building.
I reached out to them to help me out to restructure. I had the passion, but I didn't know what to do. That time I said I don't need money, because another thing that I realized, the communities don't grow because they keep on looking for aid, donations. Afford helped me that time, and that helped me to put together the Ugandan Investment Forum.
Afford provided us with the finance as well as the business planning, helping us with our cash flow, helping us with our forecasting, essentially just everything we needed to be able to set up the operations in Nigeria, and also help us hire a couple of people that would take the business to the next level. I use it to pitch for projects. I use it to mentor other younger business or entrepreneurs who are trying to do similar things or start a business. So yeah, from a personal point of view, the whole journey has been very impactful.
Afford is now looking to meet the huge investment, climate, skills and knowledge challenges facing Africa in the next 30 years. We will continue to innovate in finance, education and housing. And we have plans to consolidate the Afford Institute with new offices in Ghana, Nigeria and Belgium.
Just helping entrepreneurs understand that they can do more for their native countries. They can actually educate and employ and give back to their country that they're from and benefit individuals in that country. So yeah, just a big thank you to everybody at Afford, and here's to another 30 more years.
The key priority for activism has to be an understanding that the future of global economic development is tied to the prospects of development on the African continent.
To have the scale of impact that people in the diaspora can have on the continent and with the continent, there needs to be a Ford bringing that power together. So I really applaud what a Ford has done and is doing, and the fact that it's been doing it consistently for 30 years, and I hope it continues to do it for the next 30 years.
Long may it continue, and happy birthday to a Ford.
So join us. Contribute your time, your skills and your money to mobilise a new generation who can deliver on the African Union's 2063 agenda for a brighter, sustainable African future.
Justina.
That we wouldn't have achieved the great impact that we have done over the continent of Africa without our funders. Without our partners and funders. But it also includes philanthropists, foundations, DFIs and government agencies. So we would like to, and also especially the global diaspora. So we would like to especially thank Chatham House for their support over the years and their engagement, various government departments and agencies, including the FCDO, the Swiss Development Agency, Enable, Belgium's Development Agency, the EU, and also DFIs such as ICMPD, Comic Relief, and also organisations and foundations such as the African Union, the OSF, the World Bank, and the International Organization for Migration. We would also like to thank our partners on the ground, so that's MOF in Ghana, EDC in Nigeria, and Congrès in Senegal. We've also had a number of legal institutions support us and provide us with over £2 million worth of legal support. And this includes Reed Smith, Leighton and Watkins, and Morrison Foster. But we know especially that the work wouldn't have been achieved without our workers at a Ford, and they punch far above their weight. Our contractors, our volunteers, but especially the global African diaspora. So we thank you for engaging with us and utilising your skills, knowledge and resources. So, for the next 30 years, we would like to, there were some key themes, some key themes, for example, that were mentioned. And I know that, Tom Ilube, who was one of our speakers at a previous AD3, and William mentioned some key areas. So it's teamwork, community, talent, and tech. So what is it for a Ford over the next 30 years? What do we need to do? We believe that in order to scale and to facilitate further impact and greater impact on the ground, we do need support from all of our partners. And that means to bring all your skills, all your resources, and all your networks and money to contribute towards the work that we're doing in Ford. And we have some very innovative programs. So for instance, we have the Diaspora Finance Program, and this is all about launching, or our initial project is about launching a 10 million diaspora bond to facilitate sustainable, low-cost housing in Ghana. It's about facilitating, contributing to our ABC program, our Africa Ford Business Centre program, and that's about developing and finding the next unicorn that can potentially scale up and become an international business, much like what M-Pesa has done in Kenya, of being transformative, but also being one of the leading players. We also have the Ford Institute, and that's about building our research capacity. We do have the knowledge and skills within the Ford, but we need our partners and we need the diaspora to contribute further with regards to this particular program. We also have the Return of the Icons project, and that's seeking to return stolen African artifacts and human remains. And that work has grown in prominence across the country and has swept globally in different countries calling for the return of their icons. So what do they say? It says they say it takes a village to build a single point of greatness. So what are we asking for you to do? To contribute further, to help us to facilitate the development of Africa and different African countries, to facilitate what's happening on the ground in terms of new businesses, to bring your talent, to bring new ideas and innovation in order to transform the continent further. So you will see that in your pack you will have a code which we would want you to fill out, and it really kind of details what you want to obtain from Afford and how we can help you to achieve your ambitions and goals with regards to transforming the continent of Africa. And also it's about kind of sharing what kind of networks you would want to, in order to do that, what type of collaboration, but also it's about policymakers. How can we engage with you further in terms of what you're doing? So one example is kind of UK-Africa trade and investment. We would like you to further kind of partner with Afford in coming up with strategic ideas, both with regards to the UK, but also the continent in Africa. So I'll leave that point now, and I'll introduce the panel. So Jibril will be the moderator for this panel, and he will introduce the speakers. So thank you very much.
I'll do some rearranging. With poor eyesight. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, colleagues and friends. The Afford people have informed me that the first diaspora, African diaspora organization in the UK was formed in 1787 by Oluwado Akeanu, called the Sons of Africa. And of course, Sons of Africa's preoccupation then was to end the trade in enslaved Africans. By the early 1900s, we have the African diaspora from the continent, from the Caribbean, and from the Americas, coordinating and playing a leading role in decolonization. By the 1990s, when Nicholas Atampugre and Chukwuemeka Chikezi, who by the way is in the room, formed Afford, in retrospect we see that it's within the same tradition of African diaspora taking a leading role in trying to shape the positive destiny of Africa. Now, fighting the slave traders and the colonialists, if you are on the fighting end, it's slightly more glamorous in that you have a named enemy. In fact, you even know their addresses. So the attack on them, those people who do that work, seems to be more glamorous. But in terms of importance, this generation of the transformers and change makers, as Afford names them, they are involved in a rather silent war against poverty, a silent war against the injustices that affect Africa, and all of the wars against the indignities that affect the African people. So Afford's thinking and the guidance I've been given for this discussion is they're looking at this new breed of African diaspora activists, their role in development in the next 30 years and beyond. Our panel, we have 5 people on the panel divided in 2. We have 2 speakers who have not been able to join us due to prior commitments, but they've sent us videos. The first one is Tom Ilube CBE. Tom is a leading sort of entrepreneur on cybersecurity, runs a PLC in cybersecurity listed in the stock exchange. His previous roles included being the Chief Information Officer of EGG PLC. Some of you may remember EGG PLC. I think it was the first internet bank in the UK. So Tom Ilube was there. And most importantly for our purposes, he's the founder and major funder of the African Gifted Foundation and also launched the Africa Science Academy. The foundation in Ghana specializes on picking girls and training them in STEM. And I think he had already graduated several cohorts who've got their degrees. And he is actually the chairman of Rugby UK. The second presentation, some of you've seen Willy Mutenza. Willy Mutenza is a very successful entrepreneur and the founder and chief executive of Uganda Convention, which promotes investment in Uganda. And he is also the CEO of the Promoter Africa Limited, which is a public relations and marketing company. So we would have the two videos, and when that's finished, I would invite the three other speakers who are in the room, and we would have an interactive session with them. Can we have the video, please?
What inspires me to do the work in Africa that I do in terms of charity and so forth is that I grew up for some of my early childhood in Nigeria and in Uganda, and so I had the experience of living on the continent as well as the experience of living in the UK. And what I find is that the impact that I can have through my projects on the continent is out of all proportion to the impacts that I find I can have here in the UK.
For me now, what I've embarked on as a diasporan who has come from humble beginning, succeeded a lot, is trying to encourage my fellow diasporans to repatriate some of their knowledge, what they've learned, back home. And we need to take the best we've learned here. That's why we do these investment forums, helping our fellow diasporans expose opportunity there is in Africa.
The achievement that's been really precious to me is to see some of these exceptional young women from exceptionally difficult backgrounds come through and perform at a level that is as high as anywhere else in the world. So we've had young women achieve 3 A stars in the space of just 10 months, start to finish, and then get picked up by a university on a full 4-year scholarship and go off to somewhere to have their impact in another part of the world or another part of the continent. That's why I do what I do.
When I see companies like Word Remit, and I see it succeeding, and when Word Remit, when at its initial stages, I was the one who was given the marketing contract. And this also makes me happy that the founder of Word Remit, Mr. Ishmael, interested an African with millions and millions of marketing budget. And we grew this Word Remit together. I had the exclusive contract, and we grew it to now become a unicorn worth billions. Things like this also makes me happy that big company can reach out to us, knowing, oh, we can add a value.
At the moment, we're happy being a pre-degree college. We prepare our students to go off to the best universities in the world, and we're not planning to be a university ourselves. Having said that, we do have plans to build a big state-of-the-art science and technology campus. It will be an absolutely iconic venue for students from across Africa to come and study. And in fact, what really delights me sometimes is when I see students and teachers from schools here in the UK and other parts of the world that look at what we're doing today and say, I wish I could go to a school like that. That really tells me that we're doing something quite special.
But one of the things for me as a community activist that makes me really, really happy is seeing my fellow diasporan going back home and succeed. I've got so many of them. who've gone back to Africa, not only to Uganda, and because either have guided, either have mentored, and they've succeeded. Myself, I've set up quite a very successful real estate company in Africa.
When I think about diaspora activism on the continent, I think about three things. I think about teamwork, I think about talent, I think about technology. And I think anything you do from a diaspora point of view, you need to think about those three things.
When you become successful, don't leave your community and just go and live in wherever the rich people live. Stay in your community. Start investing your own money. Try to volunteer. If you've learned something, go to the church. Give back that knowledge. So volunteering, what we are doing with the Africans is also stop the culture of donation aid within our community. Start looking for money from councils. Start investing your own money. I think I won't want to talk about what I've done, but for me, I believe in investing my money in the community, in what I do. I can't keep on calling myself an activist when somebody's giving me money to do what I'm doing. So I put in quite a lot of money so that I can impact that Africa, because somebody has impacted me.
I am not yet hearing huge-scale discussions about the impact of artificial intelligence across Africa. And the danger is that if we don't have those conversations and think about what the impact is going to be and fully engage in them, then we'll spend the next 30 years playing catch-up again. So it's really important that anything we do, technology, and in particular this new wave of technologies around AI and robotics and so forth, we are considering the implications of those. And we in the diaspora that are immersed in that wave of technology are in an ideal position to bring that thinking and share it through teamwork and through the talent that there is on the continent.
We thank the transformers and change makers, Tom Ilube and Willy Mutenza. Can I now invite Farah Jirdeh to join me here? Can I invite Chief Bimbo Robert Folayan? And can I invite Dr. Justina Mutale? Thank you. As our panel settles, let me make a couple of announcements. Ford is planning to do an event on the 28th of July, that is 3 weeks from today, at SOAS from 5 to 8. So look out for the announcement in your emails. Also, it may be no secret to anybody here that amongst other things, the outgoing executive director, Onyekachi Wambu, has published his second book on Empire Windrush. In 1998, 50 years after Empire Windrush, he published a book on the topic, and on the 75th anniversary, he's published a book about 2 weeks ago. I'm pleased to tell you that signed copies of the books are available with us in the entrance of Chatham House. You can get a copy of it later. We have a panel, 3 people. Farah Jirdeh is the founder of the Pharo Foundation and later served as CEO and still serves as a trustee, overseeing the investment that they make across Africa, mainly in East Africa. Prior to that, she worked as an executive in the retail industry in the United States of America. Chief Bimbo Robert Folayan is the CEO of J. Williams Limited, which is the promoter of the Nigeria Direct Investment Summit, which many of you would have heard of. And he is also one of the trustees working to create the Nigerian Diaspora Investment Trust Fund, which was inaugurated in Abuja in 2020. In his previous career as an IT consultant, his clients include many of the FTSE 100 companies. And Dr. Justina Mutale is the founder and president of the Justina Mutale Foundation and Scholarship Program. And amongst other things, she founded and runs the Positive Runway, which uses fashion and the creative industry to promote the ending and spread of HIV/AIDS. She's been recognized in very many influence lists and has been for many years a civil society delegate to the UN Commission on the Status of Women in New York. This is our panel. The brief we've given them is to give them 8 minutes each. We'll start from Farah and end with Justina for them to give us their view, their opinions on the topic of the day. After that, we would have about 30 minutes for interaction with the audience. Over to you, Farah.
Welcome. The foundation started 12 years ago, and one of the basic reasoning of starting the foundation was to give back to Africa. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to find how to give back to Africa. First of all, I'm from East Africa. And when you are from Africa, as the doctor said, and you grew up in Africa, and you move into the rest of the world, somehow that life never leaves you. I'm originally from Somalia, from Somaliland particularly, and then there was war that happened in Somalia, as you all know. And one day, when I was thinking about the foundation, and I was talking to a relative of mine, asked me, but why are you worrying about what happened there? You no longer are there. You no longer have your life there. And I described why I needed to do this, or why we needed to do this. In an analogy, which is a child that you had who wanders around and went wrong and went to the world in the wrong way, whatever that is. And as long as you live, that child is going to be with you. When your country falls apart, it doesn't matter how well you live, how far you went, how successful you are. Every night when you sleep, that world is with you. You have responsibility to participate of building back the pieces that fell apart slowly. And that was the reason I gave. As long as a mother lives, she will never forget about her child who wandered around and not doing well. She has to participate. She has to bring him back. She has to work with him. She has to build him back to where she thinks he deserves it. So we went back. We structured the Pharo Foundation, and for the thoughts of finding out how to give back. And what comes back to me, even in my childhood up to now, is how little Africans invest their human capital. And the key to human capital, in my opinion, and has always come back to me, is the well-being, education at the core of the well-being of that human capital. You could never run away from that. The core of development has always been back to education. And when I said education, we all thought about it having more schools, more children attending schools, whether the schools are doing well or not, no matter. And one of the things that I think we are really proud of and gave us a light was to invest in early childhood programs in Africa. The dearth of Africans is investing from 0 to 5-year-olds is insurmountable. No country, no world will ever get to where they want to be unless they invest the majority of their resources from 0 to 5. It's so indicative that a child who had a basic early childhood development from 0 to 5. Even if they don't get anything else after that, they will fetch for themselves. If the child is literate a little bit, reads to a certain level, have been checked malnourishment, their eyes checked, their ears checked, their deworming happened. If that child is nurtured up to 5 years old, the likelihood for them to succeed has been proven over and over again. And I honestly say, one of our proudest moments of investing early childhood happened in Somaliland. We started a program in 2015, partnering with the government, saying to them that we really wanted to get into the public schools. And investing in public schools are important. So we didn't have any way of investing in public schools and juggling with the bureaucracy of government. All the public schools in Somaliland never had early childhood unit. The Minister of Education never even had a unit of developing early childhood. It was not in their thoughts at all. So we said, why don't we start us building the units in the public schools, only concentrating from 4 to 5 year olds before they start grade 1. The success from 2015, now we have 18 units in public schools in Somaliland, where more than 900 students are attending every year. We feed them, we clothe them, their school, we check their health, we do all the necessary things for the child to develop. And from that, we follow the children from grade 1, training their teachers. We don't run the school. The Minister of Education runs the schools, but we focus on following our children from grade 1, training the teachers, having the toilets in their schools, so on and so forth, and following them all hopefully up to grade 8 in elementary. And the results are here. We did a very rudimentary study and just a year ago, and we saw the differences between the children who attended our centers versus the children who never attended early childhood, who started schools grade 1 without having any early childhood programs. And the differences is stark. So that's one of our successes. And diaspora in general is key to development in Africa. Each and every one of us who have ever lived, who claim to be African, it's not the responsibility of others to develop Africa. It's only Africans' responsibility to develop their own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Farah. And I remember whilst I was still chairman of FORD, that Farah generously provided money to afford. I think it was a check of £180,000. So we're very grateful. Thank you so much. Bimbo, over to you, your reflections, especially perhaps on investment into Africa.
The story started about 30 years ago when I relocated to the UK as an activist in Nigeria. There was an election, that election was annulled, and some of us activists formed ourselves into groups fighting the government, carrying placards. And I just got married as a young man, but I was clammed into detention occasionally by the military people. Because my wife was pregnant, about 2 months pregnant, we decided to relocate abroad just for a few months to see what was going to happen. And we're still here since that time. We had our firstborn. Democracy was now restored back in Nigeria, but then I decided to stay. But before I came to the UK, I was working as a financier. I was in the finance sector in Nigeria, in Ikeja, Lagos. So I had to retrain into ICT. I had to go back to university, I had to do so many exams, and then I became an IT consultant. One thing I noticed when I got to the UK was that Nigerians were working in silos. People were not talking to each other. Even I'll get into companies, and I'll see people that look like myself, they don't even want to talk to me. So I reached out to a few guys. I got into a project at the Royal Mail Post Office, and there were 8 of us engineers that were supposed to update all the systems across the country. It was called the Year 2K issue around that time. And I worked with these 8 engineers. We worked around the United Kingdom, and quite a lot of them engineers from Nigeria, but we were not talking. So we now decided, I decided to set up a group called Association of Nigerian IT Practitioners. And that was how we started. And a lot of them, most of them are relocated back home now because they made so much money around that time, in the Year 2K time. Along the line, the Nigerian High Commission was thinking of how to reach out to the Nigerian community to make them more cohesive, because there were too many fights also within the community. So they invited all the associations, and my association was one of the associations that was brought in. So I got to the High Commission, and they set up an umbrella body called CANOC, which is the Central Association of Nigerians in the UK. So I contested for election to become chairman under CANOC. Somebody, Dr. Makabani, won that election. A few years down the line, they invited me back again. We know what you're doing in the community. Just come and be part of us. So I ran for election again, and I won. So I became chairman of CANOC. So as chairman of the Nigerian community, I was going around. One of the complaints from community members was that the previous executives were not reaching out to the community, that they were too elitist, just talking to the ambassadors. So I decided to print thousands of complimentary cards, and we were just giving out. I was invited to so many events all over London. And every time I'm meeting an African person, a Nigerian person, the first thing they're saying to you is, I have a project. I have a project. I'm looking at how I can take this project back to Nigeria. I then realized that majority of people I meet in the streets of London somehow want to go back to Nigeria. They're just bidding their time, even though they love to stay here, but they've stayed about 20, 30, 40, 50 years in some instances, but they're thinking of taking their businesses back to Nigeria. And I went to the Nigerian High Commissioner at the time, Dr. Tafida. That was 2013, 10 years ago. And I discussed this with him, and he advised me, why not set up a platform to support them to take investment back home? And that was how NDDIS was born. NDDIS is the Nigerian Diaspora Direct Investment Summit. I had to set that up, and then we set up a committee of about 40 Nigerians, and we started to organize investment summits. The structure was so simple, very, very easy. We just invite diasporans that have businesses, and then we invite government from Nigeria to interface with them. And then we then use ourselves as the bridge to connect them. So rather than the diasporans going back home, facing all the difficulties back in Nigeria, because it's really difficult. Once you've lived in an environment like this, you're thinking differently. In Nigeria, you need to have contacts to be able to reach somebody. Whereas through the orientation that we've had in this country, you just write letters, you make contacts, and you can talk to anybody in banks or anywhere. So we did that on their behalf, and that was how the NDDIS was formed. Our first year, we partnered with a company organization called BABA, British African Business Alliance, and they came with a pipeline of projects. So the way we do it is to encourage diasporans, some of them who have money in the banks. By the way, we did a research. We found that the African community in the UK had about, that was 2013, had about 27 billion pounds in UK banks sitting there. And we then conceived an idea that we could get them to take this money back to Africa, not by remittances, by giving money to your family members, which becomes problems at the end of the day, because some of them want to buy land or they want to set up businesses, but they got into trouble because family members have maybe used the money. And then that creates a meeting between them and their families. So we started reaching out to SMEDANs, Small Medium Enterprises Development Agency in Nigeria. We reached out to the Bank of Industry, reached out to the Nigerian Investment Promotion Council, to a lot of Nigerian institutions to come to London. Don't wait in Nigeria, come to London, interface with your diaspora, and then look at their various businesses. And the way we also do it is to actually make sure that those who come into the summit, you don't even have to have a project. We will show you projects, and we just say to you, ranging from $5,000 that you could set up in Nigeria and empower your family. Rather than sending money, you're actually empowering them, and that can employ about 2 to 3 people, or 5 people, sometimes 10 people. So we have these projects ranging from $5,000 to 200, even up to $1 million projects that we have in our pipeline. And we've done this successfully for the last 10 years. I'm proud to say to you that a lot of Nigerians have relocated using our program. A lot of governments, state governments in Nigeria have also come here through us. We've been able to make them with investors. The first event we had in 2013 had over 2,000 people, delegates that attended. So it's easily the biggest investment summit of Africans anywhere in the world. That's how they describe it, because when they come, they say to us, we can see the quality of what you're doing. Because we actually invite into the room, we invite funders, project owners, we have a list of projects, we bring in banks, and then we have deal rooms, so that this is not just an ordinary talk shop. It's not like an ordinary summit where people are just talking. So we have deal rooms, people sit in these deal rooms and they negotiate. And when they reach a particular level of discussion, they come back to us. Our deal room manager then starts to follow up. COVID affected us a little bit, and we had to slow down. But the last event we had was 2011. We brought a governor from 2021. Sorry, 2021. So 2021, we brought the governor from those states, and we gave him 14 solid projects, ranging from telecoms to different types of, initiatives. Anyway, not to take your time, we're having the last, our next event is coming up, which is our 10th anniversary. It's happening October 5th. And we're coming in, just yesterday, we had to change the day because the head of civil service in Nigeria is going to be the lead, is leading the entire government team to the UK to interface with the diaspora. And so far, we already have about 30 projects. Also, we have a new initiative that we're taking up, that's taking off. There's an organization in the UK that has on its list over 200 UK-listed companies that the directors can actually sit on the board of an African company and come with the wealth of knowledge, wealth of contacts, finance, and everything to advise them as a non-executive director. So we're launching this in October. And also, we're now moving into what they call ADDIS, which is African Diaspora Direct Investment Summit. I just got back from Kenya and Uganda 2 weeks ago. We talked to the parliament and some of the government officials. So they are also coming to London, but from next year, we're going to be doing an Africa-wide investment summit. So just like you said, we need to be taking something back home. Why do we need to take something back home? We are the bridge. Because Africa cannot avoid us. When they want to negotiate, they should be talking to us. We should be the bridge that can connect all of these companies. We connect the companies that we've been dealing with. I've worked with a lot of companies in the UK as an IT, independent IT consultant. So we should be able to take some of these companies and take them back to Africa, because we understand Africa, we also understand the UK, where we're coming from. Thank you.
I have noticed that these progressive African diaspora organizations are extremely good at relocating Africans and repatriating them back home. They're so good at it. Word of warning, don't tell our Home Secretary. Justina, apart from before you started, you set up your foundation and all of this work you do, you also worked at the Commonwealth Secretariat.
Yes.
So in your reflections, if you can just guide us through your journey from being an international civil servant to an independent sort of entrepreneur. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. It has been said that if there's one thing a woman can do, it is many, many things. And I wear many hats as I sit here. I wear many hats as I sit here, but I will focus on the two that have been highlighted in this meeting. And of course, as Jibril has said, I worked in the Commonwealth Secretariat for almost 20 years. I worked in each and almost every division, but the final 10 years I spent in what was called the gender section, in which we dealt with fighting for gender equality and, of course, gender mainstreaming in the Commonwealth. And when I left there, I started my own staff, and after some years, I joined what is called the National Alliance of Women, the UK National Alliance of Women's Organizations. While I was, sorry, I have to go back. While I was working in the gender section, every year we went to New York to attend the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women to talk about the status of women, how far we have come, how far we have to go, what we need to get there. So then I missed that for about 10 years, and when I went into this National Alliance of Women's Organization, I happened to go back to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. And I found that we were still talking about the same things that we had been talking about when I was in the Commonwealth Secretariat. And to make it worse, that was at the time, I was in the Commonwealth Secretariat when we worked on the Commonwealth Gender Action Plan on how we were, this was at the inception of the Millennium Development Goals, how we were going to achieve gender equality by the year 2015. And this was 2015 now. I'm in New York as a civil society activist. And I found myself marching in what was called Historical March for Gender Equality. And I'm thinking, what are we doing? Women have been marching for gender equality for so many years. I remember, I think, in South Africa, in 1913, women in South Africa marched for gender equality. We have the suffragist movement that started in the 19th century, over 200 years ago. We had the United Nations CEDAW, the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination, all discrimination against women, 1979. Then we had 1995, the Beijing Platform for Action, where we thought, now we've got our gender equality. In fact, at that time, that is where women, African women, came back to their homes, starting wearing trousers and asking their husbands to help with their housework. And that caused a lot of divorces in Africa. So I thought, what am I doing in 2015 at the conclusion of the Millennium Development Goals and going into which was now moving into the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, the Millennium Development Goals had gender equality and the empowerment of women at the core. And again, we are moving to the Sustainable Development Goals in 2016 with gender equality and the empowerment of women at their core. In fact, all the 17 goals of the Sustainable Development Goals touch on gender equality. If we do not achieve gender equality, we will never achieve any of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But anyway, so I thought I was marching on Times Square in New York, and I'm thinking, what the hell is this? I had a daughter at the inception of the Millennium Development Goals. In 2020, this is my millennium baby, and I'm thinking she's now a teenager and we are still marching for gender equality. Then we are going into the Sustainable Development Goals. And I thought, I do not want my millennium baby with her peers at the conclusion of the Sustainable Development Goals to come back and be marching on their feet for gender equality. So I came back to London and I set up the Justina Mutale Foundation to help accelerate the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. We have 4 programs. So what I did actually was almost to cut and paste what I learned in the Commonwealth Secretariat and create my own mini Commonwealth Secretariat. You know where they say, for all the doors that have been closed on me, I am coming back to buy the building. So that's what I thought I'd do. So with the foundation, it's mainly was to focus on leadership, because I believe that if women can get in all the leadership positions and sit at those high-level decision-making tables, everything else will naturally follow. We don't have to fight for violence against women, child marriage, and all that in silos if we have women making decisions right at the top. So that is what we focus on, leadership and, of course, entrepreneurship training for young women. And with that, I thought, how do we get there? Then we also incorporated the scholarship program, that only education can get our girls to get to where they need to be. So we started a scholarship program of which we give scholarships for young women and girls, and of course their male counterparts. We've got to find that 50-50 planet, because you can't have a highly educated woman married to non-educated man. There'll be conflict there. So we want them to be at par and to understand one another. So we started the scholarship program for underprivileged young women and girls and their counterparts from rural disadvantaged communities in Africa to access tertiary education. I know that most organizations have been international organizations advocate for education in Africa, but the thing is, they focus on the first 12 years. So the world has moved on. We are in the 4th industrial revolution. How would an African child with just a secondary or high school education compete with a child from the USA who's got their PhD? So this is where we came in, to give scholarships for tertiary education from undergraduate to master's. For the next 2 years, we are working on, at the moment, we are working on a $100 million scheme to get 1,000 African children to go into to study master's programs focused on STEM and sports, because we are in the 4th industrial revolution. We've got to get the African child understand how the world works, and they have said that by the year 2050 or so, Africa would have a population of 2 billion, and 70 to 80% of that are young people, and the jobs for that time are not even yet created. So we've got to prepare the African child for that kind of job. And also, we've got to prepare the education is not just about academics and studying statistics and facts and things like that. They've got to study the person they are dealing with. They've got to know how to sit at the table and negotiate with people from different parts of the world. What does it mean when a Chinese person raises their eyebrow? What does it mean when an English person in Britain goes, "That is interesting"? They've got to understand that. And with seeing as we have pushed into this globalization and Africa has been made to run before it can even walk, we've got to understand the world, understand the people we are dealing with, understand what is at stake, and also, of course, turn Africa around. So with these, for the next 10 years, we are intending to run 1,000 scholarships or fellowships in about 10 countries. That will be about $1 million worth. And all these young people that we send abroad, they go to different parts of the world, Europe. Some of them are even in Africa, Europe, the USA, and all over the place. And they come back and bring this knowledge with them. But of course, as a mother, once again, I'm going back to that, I believe that education can take away the feminization of poverty. When you educate a woman, you naturally educate the world. It has been said that children born of an educated woman, they can go as high as they want to in education. And also a child born of an affluent woman will lead an affluent life. This is not the same of a child born of an affluent man, especially if the child has been born out of wedlock. Sometimes men don't even look back at the children that they have helped to create. In some circumstances that they could be embarrassed. But women always take that child with them. So you find a woman in a village looking after this child, but because that village had this conference of high-profile men and some man somewhere, something happened, they went and they never even looked back. And that child, the father could be a billionaire, but they live a village life. So that is what we focus on. I'll touch on just briefly on Positive Runway. As a mother, growing up in Zambia, I remember that we never had street children. We never had homeless people. We never had people sleeping on the street. In fact, I was shocked when it was a cultural shock when I came to the UK and found people sleeping on the streets. Because in Zambia, at that time, land was free. You could just find a space and build a hut, and even crazy people that we called, I don't know how you call them here, we could derange or something, that somebody that would be roaming the street. And in the evening, the family would make sure that that person came home and slept under a roof. So what HIV and AIDS did to Africa, one, it pruned the professional resource of Africa. And two, it created street children because it took away the lives of people in their primes. It took away the lives of policymakers, politicians, leaders, managers. And then you found that these children who had led such a good life that some of them were being chauffeured to go to school found themselves with nobody but the grandmother in the village who was being looked after by their parents who had just died. And then the grandmother has got no energy because they are so tired, and also they don't have any income to look after these posh children. Then you find these children on the street, and I knew that in a few years' time, Africa is going to have this generation of people that are better. And as a mother, I didn't want the next generation to suffer what we had suffered. So I started Positive Runway, the global catwalk, to stop the spread. I know that there were a lot of initiatives on how to lay down the message in the world to stop the spread of HIV and AIDS. But in 2011, when it was, I think, 30 years anniversary, then they announced that there are a lot of new infections in young people below the age of 24. And I'm thinking there's something wrong here. The message is not getting through. So we've got to do something that speaks to young people in their own language. And that's when we started Positive Runway, the global catwalk, to stop the spread. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. Justina, there's something I never asked you before. You know the Justina Mutale Foundation? Yes. Who is it named after? Thank you so much. We've heard 5 presentations, which is a sort of snippet of different diaspora actions on different fields. Although there are common themes like education, it's almost always there. Now we have about 25 minutes for questions and comments from the audience. The only rule is not more than 1.5 minutes. You can ask a question or you can make a comment, but not more than 1.5 minutes. So we'll take a round of few hands and then come back to the panel for their observations. Do we have a roving mic? Yes, we do have a roving mic. Okay, don't be shy. We've got one at the back. Can I see one order? I need a female now, the first female hand. We'll take these first 3. 1, 2, 3. Onyekachi, there's no way I'm going to take a question from you. Yes. Yes.
Good day, everyone. My name is Wilson Erumebor. I'm a senior economist with the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, and I also am a PhD researcher at SOAS, University of London. I think my comments and question is based on the premise that FDI is the way forward for Africa, and the fact that we've seen many young Nigerians leaving the country, especially in the last couple of years. I think that opens the room for us to be able to attract even more FDIs into the country, as opposed to the portfolio investment, which we all know is can be very tricky at times. So my question is to Chief Bimbo, and I like the initiative you talked about. I think that's the way to go. So I'm just curious to know how, for instance, one can be part of that initiative, and how much support or collaboration do you get to do with local institutions in Nigeria? What sectors are you more interested in? Because it will be interesting to see. I mean, perhaps we have the Nigerian Economic Summit. This year we would have the 29th summit, which is the highest gathering of top public and private sector individuals. So it'll be interesting to see how much partnerships you're willing to have, so that we can strengthen even do more to attract that much needed FDIs into the country.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is that.
Good afternoon. My question is particularly for the over 60s.
Sorry, also just kindly tell us your name.
My name is
Yomi
Oloko, and I'm a retired social worker, community development worker who has relocated to Abuja, and I'm running a project there and traveling around Africa, so I'm enjoying myself. But one of the things I've realized as a social worker, community development worker working in the UK, a lot of us outside the business profession go back to our countries of heritage in Africa. And we do a lot of work. But while business diaspora is difficult, voluntary sector is even worse. But there's a pool of wealth of experience in the UK of over 50s who have a lot of experience in social care, mental health, early years, etc. So my question is, how can we engage with them? Because a lot of them are not like me. They're afraid of going back. They haven't been back, but they're not business oriented. So how can we engage with them so that Africa can use their wealth of experience?
Okay.
Hi, thank you. My name is Chinwe Kalu-Umar. I am part of an organisation called International Organisation for Peace and Social Justice, and we advocate for peace building and social justice in Africa with a current focus on Nigeria. My question is, so I guess we'd call me a first-generation Nigerian Brit, so my parents were born, raised in Nigeria, came here and had myself and my brother. I'm passionate about this space around security because sometimes I feel like it's great the work we're doing, but is there a risk that it could all be in vain if we do not sort out security situation across the continent? So my question is quite generic. It's not targeted at anyone, and perhaps maybe actually the lovely Farah Jirdeh from Kenel, sorry if I didn't get the pronunciation correct there. Seeing as it was really interesting hearing your story about having to leave Somaliland, and I think that's quite unfortunate that it was due to a war. So how can the diaspora get involved more in that conversation around fostering peace in communities, especially around the area of religious or ethnic intercommunal violence? Thank you.
Okay, I'll take a fourth one here.
Thank you. My name is Ruda. I'm from Somalia, particularly Somaliland. And I work with I have biomedical science that I've done in Holland, but then I live since 8 years in Milton Keynes. And I do community work, and I run an organization that's called African Diaspora Foundation. last 5-6 years. I have a question, which is actually a general question. Since that all the panels actually, there was one particular thing that all of you were talking about education and scholarship. I was wondering, all these scholarships are actually young African students that are actually going university outside Africa. Is there any plan to have a really good university, quality university, top 10 in Africa?
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I'll come to Bimbo, then Farah, then Justina. You have 30 seconds more than them. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, so I'll start with the economist. Sorry, I didn't get the name clearly. Wilson, yeah. So first of all, yeah, we are open to collaboration. We need partners. We need help. So this is something that we're doing. It's a voluntary organization we're doing for the community. So we want the community to be part of it. We started with 40-member committee, including different people from different sectors. And we look after various sectors. Initially, we started from SMEs because we discovered that the Nigerian, I can speak for the Nigerian diaspora clearly because I was chairman of that community for 2 terms. I know that most of the Nigerians are more involved in SMEs, small, medium enterprises, small projects. So we don't have that kind of big money that people talk about in Abuja. So for that reason, we focused more on getting them to take new technologies, new business models, new ideas and initiatives back to Nigeria. And when they take those ones back, and I think it answers some part of your questions also, many of them, by the time you get to your 40 years, 45 in the UK, you can't get employment in Nigeria. It's so difficult. That's the truth. So if you're carrying CVs in most of the sectors, it's difficult because it's a youth-led economy. So you have people in their 30s, they're already becoming directors in Nigeria. So we then encourage them to take small projects, which we encourage them, we support them. They take them back to Africa so they can feed themselves. They can also employ people. So it's a win-win situation. So we want partnership. If you want to be in touch with me after this summit, I'll give you more information about how you can do that.
Okay, thank you. Farah?
The question of security is really critical, and it starts in the diaspora, because the diaspora can be beneficial to the country's justice and security, or can be hindrance. And one of the reasons, for example, that the war that is happening in Ethiopia is fomented by the diaspora more than the people who are in the country. And it's very important, and the divisions that the communities in the diaspora create outside of the country is much more damaging to the country itself. They don't live there. Their children don't go to schools where the wars are happening. And they create the inter-ethnic divisions outside of the country and bring back to the countries. So the diaspora can play huge amount of enormous role by creating peaceful dialogues in the countries that they live in, interconnecting, creating, making sure that they tone down the divisions. And internet plays, also internet and social media play a huge amount of critical, damaging, name-calling that really foments animosity among people who have lived or live together in the countries. So very good question that you have made. Diaspora can play an amazing role by creating peaceful dialogues with their communities in the countries that they live in to give back to their country, saying or making the animosities down and confronting those people who are creating animosities among communities. It happened in the Somali communities for so long. Thank God we're getting a lot better now because more peace happens in the countries. The communities cannot be manipulated. But the recent war in Ethiopia majority of the fomentation of that war comes from the diaspora. And we need to be very careful on that.
Justina?
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to touch on the question on education and the top 10 universities in Africa. I think anybody who understands the global system, how it works, Africa has been left out of most of the global governance decision-making tables. We are just told what is happening and what needs to be followed and what we need to do. So in that way also, I always watch the lists when they talk about the 10 or 100 top universities in the world, and most of the time there's no African university indicated there, and I always wonder, why not? Of course, it is a good idea that perhaps we should start our own list of 10 top universities in Africa, but also to do with the scholarships and fellowships that we work on. We do have partnered with some universities in Africa, as I said before, that give scholarships to some of our students. But this is why we want to send these children abroad, to understand how the world works, and so they can be influential at those global governance tables. I will not go into that because it's slightly political. I studied politics and international relations, and this is not the table way to go in there. But anybody who understands that is that Africans most of the time do not have the upper hand. They are just on the receiving end of the decisions that are made. And of course, on some of these lists, Africa doesn't even appear. Africa would be touched on where it is beneficial to the global governance system. And where it is not, Africa will be left out. And I think as we go along, this is something that we need to work on to make that footprints in there. For example, when we talk about the United Nations Security Council, we've been advocating to get an African country. With the 54 countries that we have in the United Nations, yes, we still do not have a representative on the Security Council. And the Security Council is the one that makes binding decisions. The General Assembly is just opinions, this one saying this and this, it's never binding, but it's the Security Council that is binding. But there are a lot of other places, other global governance systems in which we don't have any footprints, including, of course, the top 10 universities. Who decides the top 10 universities in the world?
Indeed. Now, Farah, you run your organization. It has presence in different African countries. To Yomi's question of how do you absorb some of the older diaspora professionals, can you kindly reflect on that?
It's actually a very, very good question, because we don't talk about, we only talk about businesses, but actually the the non-profit, the people who work in social industries, mental health, are not utilized enough. I totally agree with you. How it's going to be done, I don't know. But we need them back, because mental health, child poverty, social workers, elderly, huge amount of African cities are now facing elderly abandonment or not being taken care of. It will be huge beneficial to create a system where we can absorb these wonderful people who have worked in these industries. And it's something that we need to look into.
Okay, so we have one question here, and then one here, that's 3. Now I have to, now it's difficult. I'm going to choose 3, then 4, and then I really have to give it to Chooks at the back. Otherwise, my head is... Please.
Thank you very much for the amazing panel. I have 2 questions. My name is Fahad Khalid. We raise capital for projects within infrastructure, gas, oil and gas, and agribusiness all over Africa. I was in Togo day before yesterday, and the challenge that we have, we also identify local and international companies for CSU talent, especially African diaspora. So now the challenge that we have is this, that in order to convince the diaspora to go back, and there's a huge currency difference in the packages and salary, and sometimes the senior managers or manager level diaspora, which companies like big consultancies, oil companies and mining companies need. So it's very hard for us to convince the local diaspora to go back on the package that's been offered locally. So can you help me understand or perhaps suggest how to best convince the diaspora perhaps to go back and build Africa? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's one, oh, here.
Hello. Yeah, hi. My name is Khadija George Sase. I work in the arts field and co-founder of Mboka Festival of Arts, Culture and Sport in the Gambia. My question is a very generic question, and it's looking at the 30 years, not even 30 years, 1 year going forward. In this, one of the speakers in the films mentioned that we need to be already in the discussion of AI. I know it's a big question. Are there any kind of pointers or any kind of comments that any of the panelists could make about that, about how we get to that so that we're not left behind? Thank you.
Here.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Rosemary Gituma, coming from Kenya. Thank you very much, Professor, for inviting me. I came here on other things. For me, diaspora, really it's very, very exciting. Every time I'm in the conversation about the diaspora, in Kenya, I sit in the board of Kenyan diaspora, and just like it is coming out, really the answer to most of the African challenges that we have is really has to come from diaspora, and responding to the issue of the education. They may say whatever they are saying, but they are facts. The best engineers are actually from Kenya. You can take that to the bank through our schools. The best medics in the world are from Nigeria. The best musicians are from South Africa. So what I'm trying to say, some of the things that we hear, some of these things are the terrors.
Yes.
Let us not even take them so seriously.
Yes.
Because we can actually prove it. Then, the most developed countries in the world, look at India. The force behind it is diaspora. Everywhere is actually diaspora. So Africa, we have what it takes. We have our resource out there. So let us put ourselves together. And let us also not get into the problem of, working in silos.
Yes.
The trade, the trade agenda now is consolidated.
Yeah.
So I think even for diaspora, let us come together and form, a body which is now going, so that again we don't reinvent the wheel.
Okay.
We can have one country model what a diaspora needs to do, and then we replicate it, we customize it. I like the idea from Nigeria. And thank you very much even for what I heard about what your government is doing. So please, diaspora, we are the ones to read. So that now our readers, when they are having those tables, they are sitting. When they come to UK, the diasporas from Kenya, from where, they should be there. Because we are the ones who are here. We are the ones who know what is happening. Anyway, I can talk and talk. Thank
you. The gentleman there. The gentleman there. I know.
Hi there, thank you. My name is William Awomoyi. I'm a member of Common Futures Conversations. My question is regarding diaspora finance. So there was I think somebody briefly mentioned at the beginning that there's somebody trying to create like a diaspora bond. And I think the issue is that there's obviously high risk of government defaults in Africa. So my question is to anyone on the panel, how do you mitigate that sort of government default if you are going to try and create a diaspora bond?
Answer that. And the last question, Chuku Emeka Chikazi. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I
wanted to make a comment, if I may, but I hope that the panel will respond. Thank you very much. It was very enlightening. The conditions at the moment, the geopolitical but also the economic conditions, mean that economies in Africa are struggling in terms of the macroeconomic conditions and so on. So I think that makes diaspora contributions even more important, because if you look at the trend, aid is going down. Somebody made the point about portfolio capital being challenging. FDI is also important, but is difficult to come by. So the diaspora actually becomes far more important at this stage. And I think this means that, and I put this to a forward for the next 30 years, there are some challenges to think about in terms of the institutional arrangements to leverage that capital. But listening to the questions and the comment here in the audience, one of the things that strikes me is the opportunities for cross-fertilization. So I'm looking now for investment, say, for example, in Sierra Leone, where I'm based. And I'm looking at you, Prince, because you're talking about Nigeria. But actually, we need to be gateways into investment. We have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Africa is going to have to look inward because of the geopolitical environment. And this is going to require a lot more trade. So those of us who have been in the diaspora, we're a little bit better, I think, at doing some of that. But I'm hearing a lot of positive things about the diaspora. And one of the things that we need to take account of, I think, is the fact that the diaspora is also being weaponized. A lot of political parties in Africa now rely on the diaspora to raise money. And then the diaspora expect jobs. And some of these diaspora are not necessarily as well qualified to do the jobs. So I think we need a critical perspective, on that. The last point I'd make is that or a couple of interrelated, is the issue of inclusive growth, the importance of inclusive growth. If we don't actually create more jobs for young Africans, we are going to have these issues of security, as has been mentioned. And it seems to me that this is one of the critical issues that is really important. So I'm saying this because I think Afford is thinking about the next 30 years. And congratulations for the last 30 years. It is amazing what has been achieved, but there's so much more to do. And I think the storytelling, the communications, and the agenda setting are going to be really important. Thank you.
Justina, we'll start from you.
Okay, I'm going to respond to Khadija. She talks about the discussion on AI. Like I said, some of our scholarships and fellowships are focused on the STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I think, and that is where AI falls. We are trying to get Africa to catch up with the rest of the world on how to deal with AI and how to work the AI, and of course create our own AI systems rather than have other people do those for us. So we have not forgotten that we need to catch up. We need to catch up, like I said, because we know we are now in the 4th industrial revolution, and we have to bring up the African child to understand how the new world will work. Most of the new, like I said, the jobs, future jobs, do not even exist as yet, and the young people have not even been trained for them as yet. So through those fellowships and through those scholarships, we are trying to catch up and equip them with the necessary skills for the jobs of tomorrow, and of course for the economy of tomorrow, and of course to be able to operate in a digital economy and a digital era, and of course in the AI system. So from my part, from my team and myself, that is our contribution to try and get Africa to catch up on the AI.
Okay, Bimbo.
I'll take the question about how Africans can go back, and then I'll go into it. I think I have a couple of other ones. I was in Kenya some few weeks ago, and by the way, I was in Kenya, and I saw the engineers too. So, I went with a group called the African International Development Organization. There's a new movement, actually, and it's falling in line with some of the questions that you're asking here. There's a new movement to get Africans to start trading together, particularly with the diaspora. but not, okay, so there are two diasporas. There's the 500 years old diaspora, and we had them in abundance. So we had people from Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and they all came to this summit. So we had people from Kenya, from Nigeria, from different places, and all of us were in Mombasa for 1 week, and we discussed about how we can start to trade together. So one of the things we're putting in place is reaching out to the government, reaching out to the AU to make sure that the Africa Free Trade Zone, some of those government policies actually supports Africans trading easily with each other. And then we're identifying the problems that are stopping us from working together. So there's a new movement to get us to start going back to Africa. Now, and of course, what we are doing in NDDIS is just that too. We're expanding into Africa, and that's why we just set up African Diaspora Investment Summit, and that's what we're going to be doing. With AI development in Africa, I don't have any information specifically about AI, but one thing I want to assure you is this. You know, because Africa entered into the technology space very late, we're actually getting all the latest technology. I don't know whether you are aware of that, but in the past few years, when you go into Africa, you find that the latest technologies are actually deployed in Africa, sometimes even before they are deployed in developed countries. And I've experienced it. Some of the projects we've looked at about how to build solar energy and, you know, developing new housing projects and all of that stuff, there are new technologies that were actually experimented in Africa, in some of the African countries. And I remember that there was a time that there were some technologies within the banking sector that, you know, they were already using it in Lagos. And I didn't know about it even though I live in the UK. So I think it's something, it's good for us to start having that conversation about how to, you know, start getting into AI and the robotics and all of that stuff. But it's good for us to start talking about it, but I won't panic too much, because the new technology is actually going there too. Diaspora bond. The question about diaspora bond. I was part of a committee set up by government. If you are from Nigeria, so there's a work that is ongoing about having a Nigerian diaspora bond. I think Kenya has a very successful one, I think so. There are a couple of countries in Africa that already has the diaspora bond. But in Nigeria also, we're just passing through, it's gone through the legislation. It's just waiting to be actualized. I believe that this government will actually actualize it because it's easy to raise funds from the diaspora. Chukwuemeka, you talked about FDI, and I remember that Wilson, you also talked about FDI. So we are moving away from FDI is superb. We should be looking for FDI. But we've moved away from FDI to DDI. So, and that's why we have the Nigerian Diaspora Direct Investment, which is NDDIS. So foreign direct investment back into our countries. But we think that it's more effective to actually get a diaspora direct investment, back into Africa. Because through us, as diasporans, we can reach to foreign companies very easily. And I know a lot of companies, a lot of individuals in the UK who have actually brought in companies into Nigeria. Most of the big companies in Nigeria today, through franchise, through various means of investment, are foreign companies that were actually attracted back into Africa by the diaspora. And like you said, we need to, just step it up a little bit more as diasporans. Thank you.
I'm just going to answer only the question that this gentleman asked me about how to bring Africans back. We have about 500 people working for us in the foundation in 5 countries in East Africa now, as we speak. And majority of them are from the diaspora. We attract diaspora. And there are 2 things that the diaspora don't go back to Africa for 2 reasons. One, for education for their children, and health. So the importance of having a good education for children and investing in any company that is setting up a business in Africa, especially the conglomerates, invest in education in the countries that you're investing in. Very, very critical. We do that now. We are building schools in these countries. We run schools. And one of the reasons we went into running schools, fee-paying schools, even though we do non-fee-paying schools, is to attract the diaspora. And the second thing is the health system, which people usually do not go back because of the health systems are not good enough for them to feel secure if they go back, if they have their children or their elderly parents are sick or so on and so forth. And I really encourage, if you're doing a big businesses like the mining, invest in health and education, and they will follow you. I promise you they will follow you.
Okay. Thank you very much to the panel. As usual, my profound apologies to everybody who wanted to say something and we don't have the time to give them the microphone. The schedule tells us that we would rise from here at around 6:45 for a 45-minute reception, but there's another session to have after this panel. Can I kindly indulge Ndidi and respond also to the question on the diaspora bond, because I'm also working in that area. When you look at the literature with diaspora bond, there is far more talk than action. In fact, the only 4 countries that had gone to the market with the diaspora bond, it's only 4 countries. Started by Ghana in 2007, it failed. It was undersubscribed. Then Ethiopia twice in 2008 and 11. It failed. It was undersubscribed. Then there was Kenya in 2013. It failed. It was undersubscribed. Then Nigeria in 2017. It succeeded. It was oversubscribed for 300 million. And Nigeria had changed the original target from 100 million to 300 million. By the way, we won't go into the details as to why they failed, but I've published on this. And on the 17th of July of last year, about a year ago, Nigeria redeemed that 300 million. They paid it, and they made a commitment, as you said, that they would issue another one. In dealing with the perception that African governments default, the first war there is perception, because African governments do not default. African governments pay their debts. They do not default. In fact, they pay their debts so assiduously that sometimes it's bad, because they would sooner cut social services than default. And when it comes to local currency borrowing, and some of these bonds can be issued as local currency, when it comes to local currency borrowing, in the past, currently I'm working on 3-4 countries, and all of them I have confirmed, I've asked, and I've checked the documentation. None of them have ever defaulted in the past 30 years in local currency, ever. Yeah? And one of the ways to build confidence is the interest they pay. Instead of every 6 months, if they pay it every 3 months, that might help give comfort to the investors. So again, I invite you to help us and afford to thank our August panel here. Yes. And also during the reception, you can still get copies of your books. Now we invite the chair of Afford Ndidi to the lectern.
Thank you all. I hope you took a lot from that very useful discussion. And as we said, there's going to be some refreshments later for you to engage with the panelists and members of Afford. So we come to another section of the event. Over the last number of years, there's one name that's grown and is synonymous with Afford, and that is Onyekachi Wambu. Yes. And over the last couple of years, Onyekachi has been transitioning to a step away from the executive team, still contributing, as we have mentioned, to a number of the programs within the Ford. Return of the Icons is one, and the Diaspora Bond is another. But as he steps down more in terms of the day-to-day management, myself, as the chair of the board of directors of a Ford, the team across the Ford, we've put together a short video to say our thanks for the for the contributions that you've made over the years. So please let us appreciate Onyekachi.
Hello, it gives me great pleasure to pay tribute to Onyekachi for his wonderful work at the Ford. I met Onyekachi in the 80s, and it was actually me who encouraged him to take up the position at the Ford. It was a communications job, which I thought was really promising, and I wanted it for myself, but I thought that Onyekachi would be a better fit to work with Chooks, who had founded this amazing organization, which has been the lead organization in the area of African development and in the diaspora. And we're very thankful to you for accepting a pay cut to actually come and take up this, which ended up being a leadership role. And you have transformed the role and the function through your great and deep knowledge and also your quiet intelligence, which you don't flaunt, but which you use in a very tactical and strategic way. I've been so privileged that I can call you my brother and my friend. I've had opportunity to collaborate with you in this role in Ford and in other capacities, and I'm thankful. I can only wish you the very best as you go forward. I know that you will remain a friend of Ford and that we will see what you will do in your future. You can only go higher. We're very thankful for the service that you've given to our community, which has made a great impact. And I, for one, am thankful to have been part of that journey and watching you grow and watching the space for the African diaspora grow. I wish you the very best.
21 years ago, Ford was starting its first growth phase. We'd secured funding for new positions, including an information officer. Our ads attracted a healthy range of responses. Among them was Onyekachi's. I knew Onyekachi by reputation. It was a big reputation. BBC filmmaker, former Voice newspaper editor, an all-around big guy. Unsurprisingly, he aced the interview, but left us perplexed. Why would the Onyekachi Wambu want a job with fledgling Ford? Wouldn't this role be too menial for him? Wasn't he too big for the role? My fellow panel members instructed me to have a follow-up chat with Onyekachi, just to be sure he understood what he was letting himself in for. Onyekachi was very intentional and clear about his reasons for applying. He wanted to get more directly involved in Africa's development through diaspora's agency. Well, the rest, as they say, is history. 21 years later, we have so much to thank Onyekachi for.
In 2008, Ford encountered unexpected financial challenges. As the chairman at the time, I had to follow legal procedure and make the staff redundant. During this most unpleasant exercise, Onyekachi came to me. With his immutable commitment to Africa and typical spirit of generosity, he offered to continue working without pay for a while. For the next year, he and I worked together intensely. We succeeded in restructuring Ford and introduced a service delivery capability, which led to the subsequent implementation of multi-million-pound projects across the whole of Africa. At a time of urgent need, Onyekachi gifted to Ford and the community
crucial and game-changing boost, not only to morale, but also to charity finances. I bear witness. I was there.
I first came across Afford in 2002 when I turned up as a young person to intern with the organization. It was a small team with some fabulous dynamic people, co-founder Chuks and of course Onyekachi, who had just taken up a role at Afford. Being a young intern, a little bit bushy-eyed, with a huge appetite to learn and grow in what I thought was a fascinating area of work. No surprises that I leaned on Onyekachi and others for much of my learning. Many of you who know Onyekachi will know that his impact on Africa's development extends also to the place of the younger generation within it. His dedication, his work, his passion, his insights have been an inspiration to me since 2002, and to many others like myself over the years. I cannot tell you how many people have come through the revolving doors of Afford as volunteers or interns, staff or consultants, associates or advisors. And a lot of this has been really down to the participative and transformational leadership style that Onyekachi has demonstrated. We have a saying at Afford, no one ever leaves Afford, or in Onyekachi's words, as he likes to quote Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back. So it's certainly not a goodbye. We thank you for your support, your dedication, the long conversations we've had and continue to have about sustainable development in Africa through the diaspora.
Dear Onyekachi, I hope you've heard from your friends and your comrades from across Afford about how much you mean to the organisation and how successful you've been in helping to drive Afford's strategic goals, its projects and its programmes over the last 20 plus years. Now, while this phase may be coming to an end, the new has already started in your continued work on Afford's Diaspora Bonds and Return of the Icons programme. While your level of influence continues to rise outside of Afford, I know that Afford's mission statement of expanding and enhancing the contributions that Africans in the diaspora make to the continent of Africa will continue to go with you. And therefore, in the words of Kwame Nkrumah, I know that you are not an African because you were born in Africa, but you're an African because Africa was born in you. So long. However, I'll see you soon and I'll speak to you soon. So I'd now like to invite Professor Jibril Pharo, Onyekachi Wambu and Stella to come up and provide the final panel on.
Your
Thank
last grilling on your
It's nice to hear it when you're alive. Thank you all.
Where shall I be started?
So, Onyekachi, while at Afford, of course, you had to focus on delivery and operations. But fortunately, you've not left another vocation you had, that is thinking about these matters and writing about them. You've written recently about the need on changing the nature between the diaspora and Africans on the continent. And your recent book also brings the story of the multi-generational diaspora, including the Caribbean. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to misquote Monty Python. Onyekachi, what have you ever done for us? Go.
Well, I don't know whether it's what I've done for us. I think it's what the Africa and the diaspora have done for me. So, in a way, the work has been about a quest to understand where we are and how we're situated. I mean, my life has been one of, I guess, born in 1960, so the date of independence.
Say that again.
1960. So the date of independence.
And I look older than you.
The date of independence of my country of heritage, and I always compare my performance with the country of heritage. I'm not quite sure which one of us is doing better. But then you're born at the end of an empire, which is a big moment in history. I mean, you know, and so I'm fortunate to try and understand what that means. And then we come to the UK and you're reuniting with a diaspora that we weren't aware of, we haven't seen for 400 years. And possibly, you know, I try and argue in the Empire Windrush book is actually the biggest development, this reuniting of this diaspora that, and then what can we do together? And that, for me, is just incredible possibilities. It's exciting, but you have to understand the space. So a lot of it is about, the activism is about how, you know, the book's about how do you understand the space, and then the activism is about how do you put in place structures and systems that can, you know, kind of release that energy, that power. And the book, so there are two lots of people, the intellectual people who are in the book, and then just the activists on a day-to-day basis, people like Bernie Grant, who embody that, what I'm now calling the African Atlantic space. Bell now, who's continuing his tradition, Bell Ribeiro Ade. Yeah, just so many people who inspired and said, okay, you can do this. A lot of what Affordi's Zone, Bernie Grant was talking about in 92, 93. He set up an enterprise center in North London to do that trade between the Caribbean, Africa, and the UK. It didn't work, but it wasn't a bad idea. And so Afford is another platform to try and see if we can make that work. He started to campaign for reparations and restitution of looted artifacts. I remember being outside the British Museum with him, where we were asking for this stuff to go back, and everybody just thought we were crazy. This is the 1990s, and now, of course, it's on top of the agenda. So, you know, the giants on whose shoulders we all stand on, and it's important to understand that. But I think the space, the Afford space, when I met with Chooks, I'd just done a documentary we shot in 8 countries across Africa for PBS. We were trying to tell the story of the 1990s in Africa. It was called Hopes on the Horizon. And we just met these incredible activists who had, you know, just taken on dictators, you know, just incredibly courageous people. We did Rwanda, Nigeria. We're telling your stories in the 1990s, Bimbo. And then we did Rwanda, say South Africa, Morocco, and Benin Republic, where they overthrew Karakou through a peaceful revolution. So there were just incredible characters, and I just thought, okay, I'm tired of documenting the story. Let's get involved. Let's pull up our sleeves like them and see what we can do as a generation. So that was why, when Afford came in and I'm situated in the diaspora, I'm like, okay, this is the place. This is the place, and let's incredible train set. Let's see what we can do with it. And the last train set we had was the Voice newspaper, where we were all 24, 23, and somebody gave us a national newspaper to run. Amazing.
Yes. And now, 21 years later, as you always say, it's Hotel California. You check out, but you don't leave. So you're no longer executive director, but I understand you'll be running projects for us, including return of the icons, as it were. Yeah. But what's your guidance to, or challenge or advice to Stella, who's taking over fully?
I think you have to be also, just truthful as well, and look at some of the things that you did right and then some of the things that you didn't. And we haven't really solved that problem of how do we finance our own development. We're heroic actors. We send money home. I mean, this remittance economy to Africa is worth 90 billion. But it's peer-to-peer, and we haven't created that space for the social remittance, how we pull these resources together to create institutions. The peer-to-peer stuff will never create the institutions. We need the institutions to think, to have perspectives. I remember Chooks, when we joined in 2002, 2003, we did this research. I mean, instinctively, we knew why we were sending money home, because people didn't have jobs. and we wanted to give them businesses so they could stop ringing us up at midnight, because they'd be earning an income. So we knew that income was really important. But the development industry didn't think that jobs were important. So we did a study, and what comes out in the study is that the number one issue for most people in Africa is a job. And it was not on the agenda of the development industry. And so we fought to put that. If you look at the MDGs, as it was launched in 2000, it wasn't there. Yeah. And then by the midterm review in 2008, we, and interestingly enough, business, had put that on the agenda. So we need a space where we can have that kind of independent thought. And we need to finance it ourselves. And that, in the end, I suppose, has been part of the failure, that we haven't achieved that. And that's that's going to be a solid challenge for the next generation. But I think we should all support this generation in doing that. Otherwise, that space for independent thinking and independent, in the end, we ended up calling ourselves a think and do tank, because we would think all these wonderful things like the bond. We were talking about the bond in 2002, 2003, and nobody wanted to act on this. So you have to be able to think it, and then also have the resources, to pilot stuff, and that's what we haven't got right. Perhaps we haven't communicated it to people enough about the need for that space, and it doesn't have to be a Ford only. It can be others, but I think a Ford has, proven itself and to be deserving of the trust to be able to do that work.
Thank you very much, Onyekachi. I announced earlier that AFORD is organizing an event on the 28th of July from 5 to 8 at SOAS, and that would be an audience with Onyekachi. A few years ago, AFORD did that when Chooks was receiving his medal from the late Queen. So from Buckingham Palace, he came to SOAS, and myself and Francis Williams, who's here, we grilled him. It was fun. So we thought we'd repeat that with Onyekachi. So please look out for that. Stella, I think you came to AFORD around the same time, the same year, 2002. But you were coming as a young intern. And what happened? And now sort of the men have sort of given way, and we've left it. So Chooks disappeared, I've disappeared, Onyekachi's disappeared. Now it's your show and your burden. How are you going to handle this?
Brilliant. Yes, I was, the video that we showed at the very start of today even caught me by surprise when I looked at it earlier on today or yesterday, because there's a short video in there, 2003, AD3, where we had a focus on young people, and I had led on a piece of research at AFORD at the time, and so I was involved in delivering that. And seeing that did take me back, really, just in terms of thinking about the journey. So, of course, from that point, in and out with AFORD until about 12 years ago, when I came back in for a role and have pretty much supported on a number of projects up until this point, really, and going forward and looking forward. But it's been, I think for me, the journey has been really the interest in Afford, obviously, the dynamism, the opportunity, I guess, to be able to create as we do in terms of Afford being a pioneer. And I think these are all the things that have kept, obviously, my interest, but also, the impact and looking at, I think Onyekachi had mentioned, in terms of remittances, I think in the last year was actually just over $100 billion to the continent of Africa. So that's in itself just the potential of the African diaspora and what they can do. And I think Bimbo had mentioned earlier about 27 billion, US dollars as African diaspora savings in the UK. And these are the things that really do keep us going, because we see the potential and, of course, the work that we carry out as well. And again, just going back to the points Onyekachi had made around how do we finance this area of the work ourselves? How do we do this? And of course, many years back under the leadership of Jibril, Onyekachi, and others who had, developed the concepts of Remit Aid and Remit Plus, which is about leveraging diaspora finance for, sustainable development. And all of these have really led to the African Diaspora Finance Corporation, which has been adopted by the AU, which Jibril had also, had also been a part of and led on. And I think we're really trying to push this area of work around innovative, financing, because we have done some smaller, the pilots at Afford, and it's worked. And we know that there is potential, but it really is about bringing other players into it, private sector, the public sector, the diaspora, and leveraging on these finances, because it does exist, and we know, even with remittances, that it's sustainable, it is consistent. Increases pretty much every year. It's in the last 5 years or so globally, remittances have exceeded FDI, ODA, and so we know that there is definitely room to be innovative around this financing and to ensure that going forward we can begin to really sustain not just Afford's work. Of course, our work is about the impact that we make. So it's about sustaining the impact all around and ensuring that other diaspora organizations in this space are also able to sustain their work and for us to make the impact that we want to make on the continent. In relation to, again, Onyekachi had mentioned this earlier, but it's something that we talk about as well, just about the global diaspora and how do we build a bridge of solidarity with a global diaspora. And within this is also the space of young people as well, so the second generation, third generation. How do we ensure that they are all a part of this movement, if you want to call it that, and ensure that we have much more of a focus on how we bring them into what we do and help them understand development in Africa and help them understand how to engage and, and support them in terms of what they want to do as well. Because, we were talking about me 21 years ago. Another 21 years on, not that I'm staying for 21 years, but another 21 years on, you will have other young people who will be taking over or who will be leading the sector. So I think it's important that we have a really strong focus on this area as well.
Thank you very much, Stella. And colleagues and friends, I speak on my own behalf in terms of being proud of Afford. And Chooks used to be very focused about succession, that you build the institutions, there's succession. And I can see that, now Afford is being led by the chair. Ndidi is here. Ndidi's been involved very many years, by Stella. So even us exiting, we'd only been able to do it because we thought that there's a safe pair of hands around. So we're very proud and grateful for that. And we'll stay here, as I call Ndidi, to...
I was just going to say to Justina, we've got female leadership now.
Yeah, yes.
But can I just say one final thing? You talked about sacrifice earlier on, and that was really good to be able to do that sacrifice. But there have been so many other people who have sacrificed on behalf of Afford. Afford couldn't do what it does without the help of many people in this room, and it's so good to see the faces who have supported us over the years. Gina, but, I can't name all the names. Ray, Boko. There's so many people in the room who have just given us and continue to give us the support. So it's really important to acknowledge them. I also want to really acknowledge my wife, who has really, Monica, who has been married to Afford and myself for the last 20 years. And when we make the sacrifices about not taking the salary, we do that on, with her support, and it couldn't happen without her. We were lucky on that occasion, and that happened at a time when the global economy was collapsing with the financial crisis. And we were able to do that because, and this is why it's really important for all of us to do the financial work, to become students of history. And as a family, we'd anticipated that crash was coming, and we anticipated it on the day that 9/11 happened. And Bush and Blair were saying to everybody, go out and buy, and you're saying, why are they saying go out and buy? And then you realize that actually the economy is overinflated by about 30%, and that the next crisis, there would be a 30% correction. So immediately Northern Rock happened. We sold the house at the top of the market. And that was how we financed Afford. Yes. Yeah. So those things and the investments are important. And again, just in terms of walking the sacrifice, we want to thank Farah, who walked the talk, and with Pharo invested in an African organization. And so, the next stage of all this struggle is, as Willy said in the film, is self-investment. And we appeal to you to protect the institution, so that in 30 years it's here and our young people can have, somewhere that the thinking happens, and Stella can do that for the next generations. So I'm going to carry on pitching. There's an appeals form, that you'll see on the QR. Please come back. You've supported us in the past. Come back in again. We need that support. The diaspora needs that support for that thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Whilst we remain here, I'll call Ndidi to sort of bring things to a close. But Ndidi, before you start speaking, Lul wants to take 1 minute to just say something on behalf of people who've encountered things. Do we still have the microphone? If not, just project.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try to speak as
Yeah.
loud as I can. I'm extremely happy to be here to celebrate the success of Afford, your 30th birthday. I have known Afford since its inception 30 years ago, and I have enjoyed the privilege to be part of many of your programs. And today, I'm very happy that I can say comfortably that Afford is not only a think tank, a do tank.
Yes.
And I'm sure everyone here knows. Because you empower, you transform, you amplify the voices of the African diaspora as the best economic driver. Innovative approach, as the lady here was saying earlier on, to national security. Youth employment, engagement through prosperity. I will stop there, but before I do,
Thank you. Really. Thank you.
Thank you for introducing me to your organization. Very much. Jibril, Adam is not here. Onyekachi, what can I say? Stella and Didi. You know what? Under the leadership of women, how extensive is going to be the impact of all? There is one way of celebrating success of people, the welcome of new babies, and when you let them fly. And that is, I will ask the help of those who are not going to do it with me, to put your hands together, and the ladies especially, who have a similar culture like mine, to say it our way. Thank you to Chatham House for being the enabler.
Yes. So once again, thank you very much for your kind words. If you take a look around you, this is what we're saying. This is the African diaspora. It's not focused on west, east, south, north. It's all of us together across the African diaspora, working together, as we've said previously before, to come together to achieve the goals, the dreams, the ambitions of each African country. So I will reiterate the message that we've said before. Please do engage with us. We consider you our African diaspora. We're supporting you, you're supporting us. So please do see the forms and see the QR code to how we can engage together. Again, I would like to thank the speakers for your presentations and your impact that you've made. And for Chatham House, thank you very much for hosting us. Thank you very much for engaging with us. We look forward to engaging with you further, but both with regards to what we're doing across the APPG, but also with regards to other areas of work and other events that we'll be having across our the 30 years of Afford. So thank you very much. We really do appreciate you. So without further ado, I'll close this session with the thanks for very much for coming out and once again supporting Afford. There'll be drinks, I believe, in the next room, so somebody will usher you to the refreshments in the next room, and we look forward to speaking to you all then. Thank you.